That's a bit of a problem. Copy.
In Camps Bay, he doesn't need a clinic. He has got access to state-of-the-art medical facilities, surgeries, hospitals, and stuff like that. So you have to find a way to say, students here want money for NSFAS. We said the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all. Indeed, we have to open those doors for people, for students who come from poor background. The issue of health, NHI, we've been talking about NHI for many years. It is time that we have to roll out the NHI. People have to see it. People experience serious problems with our health facilities. Something must be done. There's the issue of crime. We appreciate that 20,000 plus police have been employed. I think we are still going to experience another 10,000 plus police to fight crime. People are experiencing crime. Not so long we saw people being killed in Khayelitsha here and Michel's Plain. People can't be slaughtered like animals. Daylight, we raise children in a violent society. So those are the issues that we have to look at. Here is crime, here is a student at UCT, WC, here is a clinic, here is a road. How do you balance all these needs? You have to find a way because all these are basic for somebody to survive. So that's where the balancing act comes into the picture.
And Chair, of course, there are concerns about the contractionary and fiscal stance. How did the committee evaluate the potential impact of spending constraints on critical services and public trust? And what would you say to citizens that are worried about service delivery?
Yes, the fact of the matter is that the masses are never wrong. Once the public raises an issue, it means it's a genuine matter. And we are public representatives. We didn't apply to come to Parliament. We were elected by those people. They are quite right. The issue of water, and the President has raised it in almost all his addresses, that the issue of water in rural areas, in townships, must be attended to. And I think the Minister of Water, Honorable Majority, is trying by all means to make sure that that matter be attended to. If you are like me, who come from Malamlele, in those villages, you will know what it means when people talk about the lack of water. So we have to deal with some of those serious delivery challenges that people are raising. Access roads, even just the roads going to the graveyard. Now that is summer and it's rain season, some graveyards are not accessible. So you take things for granted when you are seated here. The municipality must make sure that it services roads to the graveyard, it services roads to schools, there's water at school. Can you imagine now with these heat waves that we are experiencing as a result of global warming? Learners don't have water at a school. What must happen to those learners the whole day? We must make sure that schools have got decent water, they've got decent sanitation, and all those facilities that are needed for an education environment. And many other services. Of course, we are doing well when it comes to electricity. Government is also doing well when it comes to housing. But the challenge of urbanization is something that has to be attended to. More and more people now are drifting into urban areas. Hence, you see the population of Cape Town and Gauteng as a whole and Durban spiking, because people say, but there are no opportunities in rural areas. Then, more especially young people, they prefer to stay in big cities. And then you don't have the requisite infrastructure to accommodate them. When people come to Cape Town here, houses for them, what do you do? It becomes a problem. So we have to deal with these challenges, and urbanization will never stop. More and more people in 2050, I think 60+% of the population of this will be staying in urban areas. So we have to plan for many generations to come. Hence, we talk about what we call sustainable development. It's not the development that caters for us who are living, but even for those who are unborn. That's what we have to do.
And Chair, just finally to people that are sitting at home, people that are at work, people that have businesses, why should ordinary South Africans be interested in the MTBPS, in the processes that the Standing Committee on Finance, Appropriations, Select Committee on Finance and Appropriations will be undertaking in the next 30 days, and why should they participate?
They must participate because this is a budget of the country. It's not a budget for treasury. It's a budget that affects somebody who's zero, who was born 2 minutes ago, to somebody who's 90 years old, who's earning a pension, social grant. So all age groups, all sectors are affected by this budget. It is about our lives. It is about services that we get. So without budget, there's no state, there's no government, there's no life. So people must be directly interested in what's happening, because that's what they voted us for, to represent them here, to talk on their behalf. And we are going to do so. And we will believe that this budget must deal with economic growth so as to dent unemployment and poverty. So that's where their interest comes in. How is this budget going to create jobs for young people? How is this budget going to dent unemployment and inequality? Yes, and grow the economy for all. Better life for all.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chairperson.
You are welcome.
And of course, that was the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, assuring South Africans of Parliament's vigilance and alertness in as far as oversight is concerned in the manner in which revenue is collected and spent. Now, there's still more to come right here on Parliament TV. Don't go away as we await the MTBPS.
Of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Welcome back. This year's budget is being presented in what the Parliamentary Budget Office describes as a polycrisis, a moment defined by several interlocking global and domestic challenges. Internationally, the world is grappling with rising geopolitical tensions, particularly on the African continent, ongoing climate shocks, and emerging financial risks that are reshaping markets and food security. South Africa faces its own set of profound difficulties. Unemployment remains staggeringly high at 43%, making it one of the highest in the world. Economic growth remains weak, forecast at just 1.1% for 2025, and households are struggling under a severe cost of living crisis. Basic services such as health and education are under immense strain, with tens of thousands of unfilled posts and declining service standards. Yet, amid these pressures, there's also been a major policy success story. On 24 October 2025, South Africa was officially removed from the Financial Action Task Force, which is known as FATF Grey List, marking a major step in restoring investor confidence and strengthening financial integrity. This success, however, comes with a warning. Reforms must continue to avoid a relapse when the next FATF evaluation begins in 2026. The fiscal environment remains extremely tight. While overall spending is on track, revenue collection is lagging, capital expenditure is underperforming, and local government finances are in crisis, with many municipalities ending the financial year in a negative balance. Against this backdrop, the minister must make difficult trade-offs, balancing fiscal discipline with the urgent need to drive growth, sustain essential services, and support struggling households. Now, to unpack these dynamics further and to explore what Parliament and the public should be watching for when the minister delivers the statement, we are joined by the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Dumisani Yanchis. Doc, thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule this afternoon to talk to us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation. You're correct. It's a busy schedule today.
I can understand, Doc, and I'm really grateful that you took time to talk to us here at Parliament TV. Doc, if we can go to the conversation. Your latest analysis described the 2025 MTBPS as being framed with a polycrisis. Could you expand on what that means and how it shapes the minister's policy space this year?
I think just thank you so much for the point. The briefing is really to set the context from which the policy statement will be presented for this afternoon, but it's also to let members of parliament, South Africans, to understand geopolitical issues that are happening, which really have impacted the cost of living globally, have impacted the economic growth globally. Different regions, mentioned the tariffs issue, is still really lingering in the back of our mind, which has large implications for economic development and growth and so many other things. But I think what we're trying to say to members in our brief is to say, look, let us understand this context. And when the policy statement, which revises the budget for the current year, but also revise the fiscal policy framework over the next 3 years, we take those contexts into account. So when we're looking at that, we see how these proposals are likely to improve on these dynamics that are sitting in the economically, fiscally, but also the implication for societal outcomes as well. So that's really in a nutshell how we try to support members in that regard.
Now, Doc, despite this positive news of South Africa's removal from the FATF grey list, economic growth remains subdued. And what structural issues continue to hold our country's economy back?
Look, I want to also start by really re-emphasizing the point that in our brief we do highlight the removal of the country from the grey list. It's a very good success story as part of the context of the mid-term development, largely because what's been lacking in our country, a lot linked to the question that you're referring to, is the lack of investment. And when we remember when we were grey listed, some of the areas that we knew would be impacted, it's the level of investment we're going to get. So what we're saying in the brief is say, look, one of the way of assessing the success of the removal of grey list is really observe the level of investment that will come into a country. Because you'd remember even before then, we've been struggling to get investment in our economy, particularly when we get direct investment. It's not really always went to productive sectors, which we expect them a lot to create jobs in particular. And that's a bigger issue in our view. We're not seeing investment coming to country, both from government and from the private sector in a level that the National Development Plan has set out to be. And we need to really push for that. And I know the budget in earlier budget tried to emphasize the importance. For me, that's a bigger issue, which Parliament, when they look at the policy statements, revised fiscal framework, and adjustment, we need to ensure there's support for investment. But also importantly, the household man, of course, the procure situation of cost of living in this country. It's not a South African issue. It's really a global issue. And whatever we do, whatever Parliament guides, the policy statements has to really take into account thinking how much households are struggling with the cost of living in this country. So those are some of the 2 points, but largely also issue of unemployment has been quite high, and really, again, largely because of lack of investment, lack of growth, lack of investment in productive sectors of the economy, which would naturally create jobs. And really, that's a really context which, in our view, members need to look at the afternoon presentation in those lenses.
And to those who just joined us at home, we are talking to the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Yanchis. Please stay tuned.
Do you know what the Parliamentary Budget Office is and what it does? This video will answer that question. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act No. 9 of 2009 provides for the establishment of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Section 15(1) of the Act reads as follows. There is hereby established a Parliamentary Budget Office headed by a Director, the main objective of which is to provide independent, objective and professional advice and analysis to Parliament on matters related to the budget and other money bills. So, what are the functions of the Parliamentary Budget Office?
The core functions of Parliamentary Budget Office is to support the implementation of the Money Bills Amendment Procedures and Related Matters Act by undertaking research and analysis for the 4 committees on finance and appropriations in the National Assembly and in the National Council of Provinces. The Parliamentary Budget Office provides an annual reviews and analysis of the documentations tabled in Parliament by the Executive in terms of the Money Bills Act. The office also provides advice and analysis on proposed amendments to the fiscal framework, the division of revenue, other money bills, and policy proposals with budget implications. Additionally, the Parliamentary Budget Office monitors and synthesizes matters with budget implication tabled and adopted in the Houses, with particular emphasis on reports by other committees. The Parliamentary Budget Office keeps abreast of policy debates and developments in the key expenditure and revenue areas. It monitors and reports on potential unfunded mandates arising out of legislative, policy, or budgetary proposals. Finally, the office undertakes any other work deemed necessary by the Director to support the implementation of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act.
There you have it, the Parliamentary Budget Office, or PBO in a nutshell, providing support and analysis needed to ensure sound financial decision-making.
Welcome back, and to those who just joined us, we are talking to the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Dumisani Yanchis. Doc, just to continue with our conversation, now, in the brief, your office knows that the households are at a breaking point, and now how should this reality influence budget adjustments, especially regarding social protection measures like the SRD grant?
Look, when you look at I like using the monetary policy approach to this, because when you look at the recent reports from the central banks, it talks about the concern around the administered prices, electricity, water, municipal rates, and all of those are some of the biggest costs that household has to bear in because most of those prices have largely been way higher than inflation over time. And clearly, look at the support to households, particularly low-income households, has often not really been way beyond the inflation. And when you look at the average wage now, it is actually way below the basket, the basic basket for food, you know. And clearly, the thinking around the support to government services and all of that has to be taken into account. If we reduce government services, essential services, it means in many instances households struggle to meet the daily needs. But also, importantly, it's not only about low-income households, but just generally households are taking a lot of strain, and cost of living is quite high. And we would expect that both fiscal policy and monetary policy would be in a way supportive rather than unsupportive. Obviously, if you have high interest rate, it means it puts more burden on households. Those who have loans and debts, they have to pay more from their pockets, both for the economy and for the households. There was some of the thinking that we said, let's understand that context, that at this stage, in the current stage, households are taking a lot of strain from the economic environment that we're facing. And the evidence, we provide that evidence that show that in our briefing, you'll remember that.
And to move on, Doc, you also highlight an alarming strain on public services, particularly health and education. So what risk to further spending cuts pose for these critical sectors? And as you answer that question, I just want to give you a case study of a department of education in the Eastern Cape. I had an opportunity to speak to the chairperson of the Select Committee on Education, Sciences and Creative Industries, Mr. Feni, who indicated that the Department of Education in the Eastern Cape had spent 99% of its infrastructure budget with only 10% of its targets achieved. And that is the department that had initially asked for over 7 billion rands, but was allocated 1.8. But even from that 1.8, only 10% of its infrastructure targets were achieved.
Sure. Look, I think in our VUNA report, we feel the oversight of Parliament is very crucial around those areas, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't allow, Parliament should not allow a report that says we spend all our money. that's not helpful. Let's rather ask government to send us a report that says what has been the outcome of that money, how much classrooms have been built, how much teachers have been hired, and all of those other things. I think that's the key issue. But another thing that we've highlighted in our report talks about the efficiency. We do recognize the importance of ensuring the efficiency spending, as you rightfully raised the point around the example in Eastern Cape. But what we've raised over the years, it's the worrying trend that shows that the real spending per capita in some of these big spending items, like health, education, has largely declined. And when you have a real spending decline, it does tell you that if you want to improve the outcomes, you are unlikely to improve the outcomes. But then it's even worse if we're going to say there even efficiency in that spend, which could in effect says the real spending is even far lower. The real actual spending is far lower than what we want to have. In a normal sense, you don't want real spending to decline, per capita. We want it to increase because that simply means services are declining. And that's our concern, that the cutting the spending or reducing the spending has to take into account to say, how do you protect the real spend per capita to maintain a particular level of growth or stable at least, rather than decline what we've seen it over time. But of course, in the last budget, we've seen that improving a lot, but we hope that adjustments would be in a way that Parliament can see stability in increasing some of the spending per capita, because that's the real essential purpose of social service. Otherwise, you would have spending which really doesn't really talk to the outcome, which is a problem for Parliament in our view, that Parliament wants to see the improvement in outcomes in education and health. And I noticed Dr. Masonga earlier spoke about the issue of health provision, which is a very critical issue. But if spending continues to decline, it doesn't say it's a priority for government or for Parliament if it declines over time. And that's our concern, to say, when you look at the revised framework, but also adjustments, we need to look at it within that context as well. Is it improving on spending per capita? Is it likely to improve on outcomes of these key essential services, which many of the population in provinces, particularly poor provinces, rely heavily on government services in that regard.
Now, Doc, another sphere of government that seems to be in financial serious distress is the local government sphere. Now, what should Parliament be doing differently to address the persistent weaknesses in municipal fiscal performances? We know that it's been a serious challenge when it comes to that sphere of the government in terms of finances.
I would say there is no silver bullet to that, because interesting, when you're presenting yesterday to the committee members, they say, yeah, we keep on rearing these things. But the big issue with the local government is that we cannot afford local government that is dysfunctional, because that's why the phase of the entry level of government services is crucial that we make it work. One of the bigger point we raise is the issue of consequences. That's the first thing. The biggest challenge in the local government, we don't see in a strong sense of consequence management, where there's transaction, failure to deliver. And what we said in our recommendations is that failure to realize performance targets should be seen as discretion, as a financial discretion or financial failure. Should not be seen as just failure to realize outcomes. That's a big thing. We need to have consequence management. Secondly, the other point that we noted is the issue of capacity. And it's a thing that, in my view, we need to deal with it. How much we're able to ensure that there's required capacity in all localized government. I understand the issue tried to use district development model as trying to strengthen that. But one of the things that we've also raised is a broader issue. It's multiple layers of oversight over a service delivery. We find that we've got district, we've got provinces, we've got MEC, we've got minister within that layer, and then we've got Parliament. All those channels, it's unnecessary efficiency. There has to be a way where we reduce the multiple layer of oversight, but ensure we've got very limited layers, but it is more effective, particularly focusing on consequence management and ensuring capacity is built in local government. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, before I let you go, I really need to ask you this one. So from what you've just said now, how does then the PPO plan to support the members of Parliament in interpreting the fiscal data and identifying evidence-based interventions during this critical period?
We'll start by looking at the revised numbers. But what we've done over the past 2 years, we've developed the capability that enables us to say to members of parliament, when you look at these numbers as presented, revised numbers, this is how they are likely to impact macroeconomic performances. This is how they like to lead employment, this is how they like to lead to growth, and this is how they like to lead to inequality. And then we let them ask the question, is this what we want to see? Is this growth that we want, or is this employment that we want, or is it the level of inequality that we want to see over the medium term? So that's the first very important aspect from my perspective. Let us show members what is the impact of this presentation likely to be on this macroeconomic performances, your employment growth, inequality, and so on. And then we can look quite deeper, going deeper into the investment, how much level of investment is likely to get to employment, and so on. So that's in a nutshell how we look at it in a nutshell. And Parliament would decide they agree with the proposals or not.
Doc, once again, thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule and for schooling us on the parliamentary budget processes.
Thank you so much, sir. Much appreciated.
Well, that was Dr. Yankis, the director of the parliamentary budget processes, giving us some lessons on the work of his office. So please stay tuned to Parliament TV.
Processing of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. On Wednesday, 12 November 2025, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will deliver the medium-term budget policy statement to the National Assembly. The medium-term budget policy statement is a critical element in the overall budget process as it sets out the policy framework for the budget presented every February. It also provides the country and its elected representatives with an update on the National Treasury's economic forecasts, adjusts the budgets of national departments, and makes emergency changes to spending. The MTBPS allows Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget through committee oversight over government departments when committees review the effective and efficient use of available resources. The process is the Budget Review and Recommendations Report, known as the BRRR, which must be tabled in the National Assembly before the MTBPS reports are adopted. The MTBPS makes it possible for Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget plans several months ahead of the budget itself in February the next year. Watch the medium-term budget policy statement live on Parliament TV and across Parliament social media platforms on 12th November at 2 p.m. Join the conversation on social media platforms using the hashtag MTBPS 2025. For more information, visit Parliament's website on www.parliament.gov.za. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
And you're still watching Parliament TV. And if you've just joined us, we have had amazing, insightful conversations with key figures in relation to the budget process. Now, we had just had a conversation with Dr. Maswanganyi, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, on the role of parliamentary committees' oversight on the budget process. And of course, we also spoke to Dr. Dumisani Janchis from the Parliamentary Budget Office, who was telling us about their input when it comes to the committees of Finance and Appropriations. And now, we are fortunate today to have a resident analyst, Mr. Mielani Holeni, an economist and governance specialist with DSO Consulting. Thank you so much for coming to Parliament TV.
It's a pleasure to have me. Thank you very much, Sifu.
Mr. Holeni, of course, these are very interesting times. I mean, we had a budget 3.0 at some point earlier this year, right? And a lot of people have been concerned with regards to our finances as a country. And just yesterday, Temikos was having a conversation now with the PBO that, yes, they said that there's a decrease, just a little bit of a decrease in our unemployment rates. Is that because people are now employable, or is it a case of businesses are there and they're really employing people?
Well, I think, what we need to consider always is that even as we are going to talk about the budget, and as much as we talk about employment as well, all of these things do not happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
They happen, in the context of, macroeconomic factors, and sometimes, factors that we don't even understand how they are working. So if we see at least, a decline in unemployment, it's positive, and it means that, there are certain sectors of the economy which are starting to perform. And I think that is the backdrop against which the macroeconomic conditions are looking like within South Africa now. We are seeing a moderate improvement in some of, the factors and some of, the sectors. Yes. We're seeing at least, some, the economy is raring to want to go. Of course, we need to be careful that, there are forecasts that had been put forward, earlier, even with the budget process, yes. Forecasts, by various, players. But all of those forecasts in terms of the economic growth, if they were to materialize, I think we would see a lot more employment of people. In other words, unemployment, declining. Yes. However, the moderate growth that we are seeing and the improvement is starting to show that, the economy is moving in the right direction, albeit very slow.
Yes. And of course, then earlier, the reason why we had the budget 1.0, 2.0, and then 3 was that contentious issue about VAT, right? Now, as an economist, at your point when you were sitting in your office and you were hearing that there were proposals about increasing that, what was going through your mind at the time?
Look, we always have to think about, the different, sectors of our economy. Okay. I think, Dr. Maswanganyi talked about the dual economy that we have. At times, I could even say that, it's more than the dual economy, because the various factors affect various communities very differently. Yeah. So for that matter, if you are increasing VAT is what everyone at least is exposed to within the economy. And it means, even the poorest of the poor are going to be hit hard very, very early with that, proposal of increasing VAT. Yeah. In as much as, there may be zero-rated, items, there may be items which are excluded, but the reality is that, you are spreading now the difficulties within the economy. Okay. Whereas you ought to be looking at various ways of how do you increase the coffers of government without necessarily impacting the poorest of the poor, and also not impacting business, because business as well are contributing, and there are very good taxpayers out there who are supporting the bulk of the economy. The middle class as well is also supporting the bulk of the economy. Yes. And I think with what we have in South Africa, we have a smaller portion of the middle class, which is supporting a large portion, given the fact that, the population statistics have been revised. So still we have now a lesser percentage of people who are in the middle class who are now supporting the rest of the people from a subsidy point of view, from covering various, functions, such as, the free basic, education that is there, the free health, and all of those other things that are given out for free. So that has an impact with regards to the greater majority.
And with today's focus on the MTBPS, of course, everybody's waiting in anticipation for that 2 p.m. Delivery of the MTBPS. What context, what economic context is the MTBPS being delivered, and what can we expect to hear from the minister today?
I think when we look at just, the metrics in terms of, the budget, deficit that we've been running for a while. So in this case, the budget, to GDP deficit, we're expecting that, there will be some kind of consolidation, although as well it will be not as major, so there won't be fireworks there.
Okay.
And going into the MTF as well, there will be at least, some kind of consolidation. But as these numbers are moving up and down, the needs, within the economy are growing.
Yeah.
So then the need to go back and borrow in the markets, may then arise, where perhaps, now when we jump into the debt, figures, where, we've jumped, I think, from about, 2003 to now, from 23%, where we have, debt, to GDP sitting at 23%, which has now risen all the way up to about 78%. So we expect that it will stabilize, at about 78, percent, thereabouts. But, that if you compare it, with a picture about 20 years ago, is a huge jump in terms of, where the economy sits, from a debt, point of view. Alongside, comes, the debt, servicing, interest, you've moved now from about 9%, you're sitting at about 21% of the entire fiscals. So if you were to take a rand, for instance, and say 1 rand, that would go into various, services, you already have to deduct, 21 cents, from that, rand. And that's the impact that, where the budget, starts, falling short and short. And then from there goes into the public wage, bills, because, you have to pay civil servants, and there have to be raises and so on. So the pressures, I think, that sit, with what the minister has to be discussing is the fact that, there are already fixed items within the budget, which is not able to maneuver much. If we then look at, for instance, the expenditure or the estimates of expenditure with regards to the social package, the social package is now like, at the top, it's ahead of the economic services, ahead of health, ahead of learning and culture, ahead of, health, ahead of every other, service that is there. Of course, we can argue that COVID-19, the remnants of it, are still being felt with, the social relief of distress, grant, that was now sitting at about 34 billion. So we're talking huge numbers, which of course, we hope that the position going forward, from where the budget, is going to be, the minister will then say, right, we've, done sufficient or adequate relief. Now we are now going to move on, and at least, come up with a different way of providing relief, which we hope that, the minister should be advancing plans around, how to grow the economy. Often we see in the opening speech of the minister, we talk about growing the economy, but if you look at the budget does not always reflect the things that are going to support, the growth of the economy. And so, if you move from about 40.5, billion that, goes into, the social, relief, the social services, and you compare it with the economic, development, which is about 23 or 21 billion, so thereabouts. There's a huge difference. And even if you now dissect, each one of the items of where the money goes to, you will find that, there's an aspect where the money, goes into backlog. The money goes into, for instance, in the economic services, some of, the bulk of the money, will go into servicing the debt, that Sandral has, for the roads, upgrades in Gauteng and the maintenance and so on. So you already have, committed amounts which are not going into real services or aspects which are going to stimulate the economy, but are going into servicing backlogs, public, service, wages, and all of those, things within there. So I think the minister has a very difficult task to be able to start, turning the ship now to perhaps, look at where the SRD was and start, making bold decisions about how do you take an SRD where people were dependent on a grant to start stimulating small businesses, to start stimulating aspects of the economy that are going to be sustainable. So I think that is where, what we are expecting from here on. Of course, there's talk about, the fiscal, anchor rules that, are going to come about. There's, talk about, the inflation targeting, which, needs to be, revised and so on. So, but I think those the things that will move the needle for us is economic growth, because we're going to have to revise down the forecasts. That is catastrophic, because then we're not going to achieve the goal. So you want an economy that is vibrant.
Yes.
You want an economy that is growing. Of course, then that economy must be underpinned. There will be expenditure of some sort. So you can't keep on curtailing the expenditure to be able to balance the numbers. Yes, you need to rein in the economy, but you need to at least, direct, the expenditure into where you are, the economic services and the growth of the economy is going to take place.
And of course, with that, you mentioned quite a few important things. I mean, on one side, you have the social economic issues that we have, right? And on the other side, you have this deficit that we have in terms of the how we have to fund these loans that we've made, right? So any suggestions on how then the minister can balance those two, ensuring that there is enough revenue to pay up what we need to pay up, but also balancing the socio-economic things, ensuring that South Africans are taken care of, because I mean ultimately there are no jobs and they are dependent on your socio-economic, on your social grants, for example.
So I think for a while we've been talking about how do we re-industrialize South Africa. We all, will tell the history of how South Africa industrialized, even in the difficult days, when there were sanctions, to the point where there are various, entities, such as your IDCs that have been formed. You have the likes of, the DBSAs that, are able to attract, capital. So really you're sitting with a number of DFIs, but you also are sitting with industry. If you look at the petroleum industry, you look at, the manufacturing industry. Unfortunately, along the way, we've lost, some of the industries. The steel industry has been lost, the textile industry has been lost, and so on and so forth due to competitive forces. But the reindustrialization of the country, we sit with minerals, which, are driving the economy. If you look at platinum, gold, we still have, quite, significant, reserves. But what we also have as well is the minerals that are powering the renewables economy, the green economy, which we ought to be taking advantage of. So in this case, we have coal as well that, we're exporting high grade, coal, going into various countries where those countries, keep it a stockpile for their energy requirements. On our side, we are not able to take advantage of the fact that we have these minerals and we can go into a beneficiation process which kicks off, the reindustrialization of the economy, and looking at specific items where there can be now processing, there can be improvement, there can be, putting up of, micro light, industries, but manufacturing. I think, you talk about the likes of, various areas, Germiston as the workshop of South Africa. You talk about, the Eastern Cape in terms of East London, as well as, the former Port Elizabeth in Quebec. Those are the motor, cities. And you also have now the SEZs that are coming up. So there are those opportunities where money should be directed deliberately, and not just, money to, stop the hunger tonight, but money that's going to at least, sustain growth and job, creation going forward.
And of course, Mr. Holeni is with us in studio the whole day today to give you some analysis with regards to the MTBPS, the budget. And of course, you should be interested because it is your money. It is taxpayers' money that you are working so hard for. And of course, you're still watching Parliament TV, and we're about to bring you the House, the National Assembly, where Minister Godongwana will take the National Assembly podium to deliver the much anticipated midterm budget policy statement right here on Parliament TV. You can have your say using the hashtag MTBPS 2025. Keep watching Parliament TV.
terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government.
Conditioning, I can see that it's not the private son that members may be having. Some of you, yes, Mr. President, there is a private son for some of us, but it's not that. It's just the hits. That's why even our gentlemen are going on. So, Honorable Member, Minister, you can table your medium-term budget policy statement.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Togo Titiza, Deputy Speaker, Aneli Lord-Piet, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Refilo Mshweni Tsipane, Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Les Kobenda, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency, the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, Cabinet colleagues, honored members, members of the Executive Council for Finance in Provinces, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the Sasha Kanyako, Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, Edward Kisbete, Chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, Patience Mbaba, fellow South Africans, we convene at a time when South Africa, like many nations around the world, is grappling with intensifying global competition and mounting economic and political divisions. It is against this fractured landscape that South Africa has been falsely accused of genocide against its white community and threatened with punitive sanctions based on falsehood. Let me thank the many communities here at home and around the world that have rejected the false narrative and the fear, hate, and disinformation they represent, and instead chosen to defend the principles of solidarity and equality. The members of the African community who recently came out publicly refusing to be used as a pawn or portrayed as victims provide us with a timely reminder of our responsibility to forge collective prosperity grounded in truth, justice, and mutual respect. They made the call not in our name. And that to me was an important patriotic call. Madam Speaker, it is in this spirit that I table the following documents before this House. The Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Adjustment Appropriation Bill, Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, and this medium budget policy statement. As we table this policy statement, we have reason to be optimistic about the future of our country. Our optimism is rooted in the progress we've made in keeping the promises we have set out. A promise to grow the economy faster, to strengthen public finances, and to improve life for all South Africans. 2 years ago, we committed to stabilizing public debt in the current year and then begin to reduce it. Despite a challenging environment of persistently low economic growth, we are on track to achieving this goal. We also committed to remove South Africa from the Financial Action Task Force grey list. We have delivered on this commitment in just 2.5 years. This is thanks to collaboration across government departments, law enforcement agencies, and the private sector. Exiting grey listing enhances South Africa's attractiveness to investors and make it easier to do business with us. However, we cannot afford to be complacent. FATF's next mutual evaluation of South Africa begins in the first half of 2026. We must continue to tackle money laundering and terrorism financing to stay off the grey list. Honourable members, we also promise to use our presidency of the first African G20 to firmly place Africa on the global agenda. As we approach the final stretch of our presidency, we have successfully concluded meetings of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, brokering critical consensus for the continent's development. We are ready for the Leaders' Summit in Johannesburg just over a week's time. Despite all of this progress, we must remain realistic about the present and the action it demands. South Africa's most pressing challenge remains accelerated economic growth to create jobs and reduce poverty at the scale required. Drawing lessons from the 2025 budget process, we have engaged extensively to build consensus on how to achieve faster growth and leverage public finances to attract investment needed to create jobs and improve life for all. Allow me to turn to the economic outlook. Madam Speaker, South Africa's economic prospects are shaped not only by domestic factors, but also global developments. Global growth is estimated to slow slightly to 3.2% in 2025. Amid ongoing trade tensions, geopolitical uncertainty, and supply chain disruptions, While the shocks of the unilateral tariffs imposed by the United States have not materialized severely as expected, their delayed effects, coupled with the rising protectionism, pose future risks to global productivity and price stability. Global equity markets have surged, driven by AI-related stocks and central bank rate cuts. But this rally carries the risk of sudden reversals. Given this uncertainty, it is critical that we leverage the immense opportunities presented by the Sub-Sahara region. We continue to make progress in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to strengthen multilateralism and regional cooperation.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day, Father. Thank you.
Order, Honorable Nanda.
Domestically, we forecast real GDP growth at 1.2% for 2025, more than double the economic growth in 2024. We now forecast real GDP growth will average 1.8% between 2026 and 2028. Madam Speaker, the structural reforms we have embarked on, particularly in the energy and logistics, will be key to lifting our rate of growth closer to levels demanded by our developmental needs. Our strategy for faster growth and healthier finances continues to be anchored on 4 pillars. The first is maintaining macroeconomic stability. The second is implementing structural reforms. The third is building state capability. And the fourth, supporting growth-enhancing infrastructure. Madam Speaker, faster economic growth requires effective macroeconomic management. Over the past year, National Treasury and the Reserve Bank have jointly assessed the impact of a lower target on our economy and the fiscal framework. This work has now been concluded, and recommends a revision to the target to strengthen the framework and enhance price stability by better anchoring inflation expectations and aligning South Africa to international best practice. Today, I announce a new inflation target for South Africa of 3% with a 1 percentage point tolerance band. This decision follows agreement between the governor of the South African Reserve Bank and my consultation with the President and Cabinet. The 1 percentage point band provides flexibility to accommodate unexpected inflationary shocks. This new target immediately replaces the previous target range between 3 and 6% and will be implemented over the next 2 years. Over time, the lower target will decrease inflation expectations and inflation creating room for lower inflation and creating room for lower interest rates. This supports household spending and business investment, boosting economic growth and job creation. The short-term fiscal cost of lower target, which include nominal GDP and revenue growth, will make achieving fiscal targets more challenging. Yet, the long-term benefits of taking this step far outweigh these costs. We remain committed to ensuring that our macroeconomic policies serve the best interests of all South Africans. Madam Speaker, our fiscal strategy aims to achieve the following goals. Anchor fiscal policy by stabilizing debt and growing the primary budget surplus. Mobilize and direct more resources towards infrastructure investment and improving efficiency and effectiveness of spending. I'm pleased to inform the House and the country that we are on track to restore fiscal sustainability. Government debt will stabilize in 25-26 at 77.9% of GDP. This is the first time since 2008 financial crisis that public debt will not grow as a percentage of GDP. Since 2008, spending has consistently exceeded revenue, driving up debt and debt service costs. These costs crowded out spending on critical services and exerted pressure on lending rates across the economy. But we are now turning this around. This year, revenues will exceed the budget estimates by 19.3 billion. Meanwhile, debt service costs will be lower by 4.8 billion. Over the MTBPS, debt service costs will grow by 3.87% annually. This is a significant reduction from the 7.4% growth anticipated at the time of the 2025 budget. We will also achieve a primary budget surplus of 8.5 billion, or 0.9% of the GDP this year. This will grow to 224 billion by 2028. Let me just explain this thing a bit. A primary surplus is quite critical because in the absence of that primary surplus, you are not going to impact on the debt structure. The primary surplus helps to change that debt structure in a downward spiral. What are the effects of that? Your debt service costs come down. Once your debt service costs come down, revenue becomes available to fund our developmental goals. Overall budget deficits will now narrow from 4.5% of GDP in 2025-26 to 2.7% in 28-29. Madam Speaker, to further ensure long-term sustainability of public finances, the government is considering options for a form of fiscal anchor. We're exploring what we call a principle-led approach that provides for a clear parliamentary oversight, stronger reporting on fiscal risk, and transparency on distributional impacts. Earlier this year, we published a discussion paper on this topic, and consultation with stakeholders and experts are ongoing. The better-than-estimated tax revenue of 19.7 billion is due to stronger household expenditure, which has boosted value-added tax collection and improvements in corporate tax receipts and dividend taxes. Lower than expected VAT refunds also contributed to improved revenue outlook. As indicated in 2025 budget, an additional 4 billion was allocated to the South African Revenue Service. This allocation was intended in part to strengthen debt collection and thereby increase revenue collection by between 20 and 50 billion per year. We'll continue to monitor SARS revenue performance for the remainder of the year. This assessment will inform whether the 20 billion additional tax increases for 2026 budget, as earlier proposed, can be withdrawn. A final decision, let me just say, if it is withdrawn and the 20 billion is not achieved, there are two options open to us. Is to then raise taxes or cut expenditure. There's no two ways. That's how this thing works. We must find revenue or cut expenditure. Honorable members, South Africa faces problems of illicit trade that threatens our economy, endangers consumers, and robs the fiscals of billions in revenue. The growing market for illicit cigarettes and alcohol poses a serious risk to public health and undermine legitimate business. Each year, billions of rands in taxes go uncollected, funds that could have closed our revenue gap and avoided tax increases entirely. According to SARS, since 2020, the government has lost around 40 billion in excise revenues to the cigarette black market. This same is true for illicit alcohol and fuel. Government is clamping down on this illegal trade. And in the last 6 months, SARS suspended 3 licenses for non-compliant tobacco production. The Financial Intelligence Center has provided intelligence reports to SARS to assist in investigation of criminal syndicates. Together, they identified illicit markets in tobacco, precious metals, fuel, and procurement fraud. Custom officials must fulfill their duty to prevent criminals from dodging taxes and flooding our markets with dangerous products. Of course, for them to achieve that, just if I may explain, they will have to need the full might of the law enforcement agencies behind them. That coordinated work is quite important. I'm pleased to inform this House that Cabinet has already taken a decision that coordinated work must take place. Madam Speaker, the adjustment in revenue means that we can make changes to our spending estimates. For the current year, additional expenditure of 15.8 billion rand is proposed amongst the in-year adjustments, and is also 2 billion rand for the building of Parliament and 1 billion rand for the Independent Electoral Commission for the 2026 municipal election. Let me explain a bit. Earlier on, if you were listening, I said, this year, we've got an over-collection of about 19.3 billion rand. That's what I said earlier on. We realize that we may not have sufficient resources next year. What we have done is to say, what are the recurrent expenditures for next year, which we can fund this year? What this 15.8 billion does, it takes those recurrent expenditures for the following year, while bringing them forward and funding them in this specific year. In addition, the spending announced in May budget for the national dialogue as well as its carry-through costs are catered for here. These allocations are on top of the additional funding provisions for education and health announced in the May budget. Madam Speaker, President Ramaphosa has consistently spoken of infrastructure as the flywheel of our economy. In line with this vision and advancing our pillar of growth enhancing infrastructure, we are shifting the composition of spending from consumption to investment. Capital payments are the fastest growing expenditure item at 7.5% over the medium term. We are leveraging public resources to mobilize private finance and expertise at scale to strengthen service delivery, improve spending effectiveness, and drive high economic growth. The amendment to the PPP regulations took effect from the 1st of June 2025, and these unlock potential across spheres of government and streamline approvals for smaller projects. 3 weeks ago, new guidelines on unsolicited bids and fiscal commitments and contingent liabilities were issued, and these took effect immediately. The unsolicited bid guidelines provide a clear structured pathway for the private sector to submit project ideas to government. The other guideline provides a framework for reporting and managing of fiscal commitments and contingent liabilities arising out of the PPP projects. Municipality PPP regulations will be amended by 2026. Leverage, and I'm still going to give you a report, President, because you said I must do it this year. It has been difficult to finish this year because of the number of regulation framework that accompanies that. Leveraging lessons from the renewal of the IPP project to streamline planning and procurement, the Department of Transport private sector participation unit is reviving the passenger transport and logistics sector. Following strong interest from the freight logistics request for information, the unit will issue the first rail corridor request for proposal by December 2025, with others following in early 2026. The unit has also issued requests for information for investment opportunities in modernizing and growing the passenger rail system. Water Partnership Office is making progress in preparing non-revenue water and reuse projects across municipalities. I mean, this term non-revenue water is still, I can't understand it. I always people, why do you say this is non-revenue water? It's water that is transported from an example from a water board to a municipality. It gets lost on the process. And we call it non-revenue water, whereas it's wasted water. Okay. These will create robust pipeline for the private sector to co-invest, and we have reconfigured budget facility for infrastructure to run for 4 big windows annually instead of just one. Since the configuration, the budget facility for infrastructure has received 28 submissions. Out of those, 9 projects were accepted for detailed analysis. Funding for the tune of 4.1 billion is also allocated for disaster relief to fix schools, pipelines, clinics, and substation damage between the last year and this year flooding in KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and Eastern Cape. To raise the funding for these BFI projects, a new infrastructure bond will be launched soon to raise a minimum of 15 billion. The bond forms part of our efforts to introduce dedicated financing instruments that can mobilize cheaper financing to support infrastructure agenda. Government will also contribute to 2 billion to capitalize the credit guarantee facility. If you don't understand clearly, please meet Dr. Ramokhopa. That's his pet project on the transmission line. Initially, the vehicle will support electricity transmission expansion, directly contribute to our efforts at new energy security, while also driving decarbonization. Let me just pause again. What Dr. Ramokhopa says is that in provinces such as Northern Cape, where you have renewable projects, I'm going to use his term, we can't evacuate the electrons. So what does that mean is that we can't take the electricity out of Northern Cape because there are no transmission lines. And this is what the project is intended to do. This heralds a new era in PPPs, where private investment in high voltage transmission lines is enabled. Our movement away from merely fixing the power utility to securing power to the grid from a range of sources. This is a key and innovative part of infrastructure reforms developed with international partners to de-risk private investment without state guarantees. We are also committed to simplifying the institutional arrangements across the infrastructure ecosystem. The new infrastructure finance and implementation support agency will be in place by March. The agency will provide project preparation support to supply the BFI pipeline. It will centralize infrastructure financing functions to systematically crowding private capital and promote the use of alternative delivery mechanisms. Honourable members, this is how we will ensure that our goal of public sector investment in infrastructure exceeds the 1 trillion mark over the next 3 years. Madam Speaker, we estimate that tax collection will remain beyond over the medium term. Despite the higher than expected revenue performance in 2025-26, gross revenue are projected to fall short of 2025 budget estimate by around 15.7 billion over the next 2 years. Improving tax revenue will require more sustainable economic growth and further gains in tax compliance and administration. Over the medium term, consolidated spending will increase from 2.6 trillion this year to 2.9 trillion in 2028-29. Our commitment to support low-income and vulnerable households through education, health, and social protection remains. The lion's share of the consolidated non-interest spending, approximately 61% over the next 3 years, continues to fund the basket of government-provided services and benefits that reduce the cost of living of our citizens. Madam Speaker, this spending is our commitment to the redistribution of income and opportunities in favor of the most vulnerable households in our society. To build on the work of spending reviews, we have got something called targeted responsible savings underway. Honourable members, eliminating waste and inefficiency in government is non-negotiable if we are to maintain public trust. That tax money is spent responsibly. The targeted and responsible savings initiative systematically identifies duplication, eliminates waste, reorganizes programs to deliver value for money. We are implementing medium-term savings of 6.7 billion by closing or scaling down low priority and underperforming programs immediately. More than half of this involves identifying people who are double dipping and defrauding in the social grant system. We're also scaling down the public transport network grant. The grant has failed to meet the objectives, and some cities have failed entirely to get the projects off the ground. An integrated public transport system is essential to support the working class communities. We will be reconsidering how to lower the cost of mobility and rework the institutional framework. Commuter rail is the backbone of our public transport system. PRASA is making some progress in revitalizing our rail system. 11.8 million passenger trips in 2022-23 to 116 million last year. This is only the start of the broader continuous process to redirect funds from inefficient programs to pressing national priorities. An update will be provided in the February budget. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the subnational sphere. Allocation to provinces protect frontline services. For municipalities, they ensure continued provision of basic services that include water, refuse removal, sanitation, and electricity. The share of the national raised revenue for provinces and municipalities will respectively increase to 4.24% and 9.7% over the medium term. The allocation, among other things, also cater for changes in population growth and to compensate municipalities for increase in bulk services, service charges related to free basic services. In addition, they also ensure the placing of local government operating capacity on firm grounding. Madam Speaker, we are making steady progress on structural reforms that are a key pillar to our strategy of growing the economy. These structural reforms are crucial to dismantling the binding constraints that have held back our economy. They are also about ensuring that every lever of the state works efficiently and effectively toward the same goal of a steady, growing, competitive, and inclusive growth. Through Operation Vulindlela, now in phase 2, since it started in 2021, we are building a tangible momentum across energy, logistics, water, and now critically in local government, spatial integration and digital transformation. Not long ago, our country was on the brink of energy crisis. Unreliable electricity supply threatened to derail our economy and the transformation of our society. I'm pleased to say that we have avoided that scenario, and instead, we have begun a march towards reliable supply of energy. Load shedding has come down significantly. Through focused and targeted interventions led by Operation Vulindlela, we are transforming the sector. We are building competitive wholesale market that gives investors certainty. The National Transmission Company has now applied for its market operator license. We are investing in new capacity and alternative sources. More than 2,220 megawatts of solar, wind, and battery projects are in delay. Eskom has added 800 megawatts from Kusile Unit 6 and is showing signs of operational and financial improvements. The movement of freight within the country faced serious challenges, resulting in traffic congestion as the transport of goods shifted from rail. This led to an overall decline in the volume of goods and export transited. reforms in freight logistics are again in gaining speed. 11 private train operators now have slots on 41 routes across 6 corridors. Port efficiency is improving with vessel waiting time down from 75%, while container handling is faster with Durban Pier 2 welcoming private operators. We expect to unlock 200 billion in investment over the next 5 years. These much needed reforms in logistics will increase the volume of rail freight, reduce port congestion, improve the country's economic performance. Water security is a constraint. We are moving faster to provide legislative certainty, clarity that will stabilize the sector. The Water Service Amendment Bill clarifies institutional rule, which will, while the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency launches in April 2026. We're also ensuring that investment in water infrastructure addresses the problem of maintenance and old infrastructure. To attract skills, investment, and tourism, we have modernized our visa system by clearing 300,000 backlog. These reforms demonstrate we have and are creating space for private sector investment and building infrastructure. Madam Speaker, municipalities are at the forefront of providing essential services. However, many are fraught with capacity constraints that hinder their ability to deal with allocated budgets into reliable services. It is for this reason that several reforms have been introduced to urgently remedy this untenable situation. Let me just give and again highlight a particular example. Minister Tlhabisa will tell you, as we are allocating the emergency relief for disaster this year, we were also allocating to municipalities that were allocated last year who have not been able to spend last year's allocation. That's the kind of constraint we need to attend to. We are piloting utility reform program to stabilize and professionalize water and electricity businesses in a few municipalities in Mpumalanga. To address persistent underspending and capacity constraints at the local level, we are reforming the municipal infrastructure grant. Where municipalities show persistent failure, delivery will shift to an indirect model through agencies such as like MISA and DBSA, coupled with time-bound capability plans aimed at restoring direct funding. We're seeing encouraging progress in metro trading service reform. Over the 2026 budget, 19.3 billion rand has been reallocated towards this reform in line with council-approved improvement plan. Financial sustainability is improving through better billing, tight credit controls, cost-reflective tariffs with indigent protection and co-funding crowding in concessional and commercial finance. Today, we launch a government's first procurement payment dashboard using data for the basic accounting system. The dashboard is available on the National Treasury e-tender website, showing the payments made to suppliers by most national and provincial government as captured on our payment system. This represents a massive step forward in procurement transparency. The dashboard will identify inefficiencies, anomalies, and uncovering opportunities for consolidation. It also enables analysis of procurement expenditure and the suppliers that do business with state, give citizens, academic and civil society the ability to hold departments accountable, supporting efforts to fight corruption and fraud. Let me just illustrate this point. Illustrate this point. If you had this system during Tembisa Hospital, what?
Order, honorable members. Let's allow the minister to make his example. Order.
What the system does.
Order.
If you read this SIU report, what they were doing, they would avoid the tendering system by saying putting all tenders that are below 500, you are not supposed to tender. You are supposed to ask for 3 quotes. And then people would go on and ask for 3 quotes and split tenders to be under 500. And then this, at the national level or anywhere else, would not be able to track that conduct. What this system does is going to help us to track that conduct and be able to raise flags, to raise red flags at an appropriate time. I know there are some colleagues who says they must abolish tenders. They must first change the constitution before they can do that. We are also waging war. We're also waging war.
Minister is proceeding on the next page. I think he's done with his example, so let's allow him to continue. Honorable Minister, you can proceed. Order. Order.
We are also waging war on ghost workers in public service. We have heard calls from political parties and civil society. National Treasury is working closely with the Department of Public Service and Administration and Home Affairs on data-driven approach that integrates systems across the government. We're beginning to see the result of this collaboration. We have already uncovered close to 9,000 high-risk cases that have been flagged for further verification. The early retirement program, which provides financial incentive for employees to exit the public service from October 2025, allows for us to rejuvenate the public service. These interventions will deliver long-term average savings of around 3.5 billion per annum. More importantly, they demonstrate our commitment to fiscal discipline and ensure that every rand spent contributes effectively to growth and service delivery. Madam Speaker, the presentation of the medium-term budget policy statement sends a clear message that South Africa is choosing growth, stability, and reform. It represents our commitment to an open, transparent budget process. It is intended to empower all stakeholders to contribute to the discussion of the nation's priorities. It makes transparent the budget framework through which the government seeks to achieve the nation's social and economic development. We will use our collective efforts to increase the pace and scale of tackling unemployment and building stronger economy. Speaker, as I close, allow me to express my deepest gratitude to the President, as usual, and the Deputy President for the Council of their support and for their leadership. Thank you all to the Deputy Ministers of Finance and the excellent National Treasury team led by the Director General. They have walked this path with me, sharing freely the insight, expertise, and passion for our country. Thank you to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services and the Governor for the South African Reserve Bank. Thank you to my cabinet colleagues, the ministers of the Committee on the Budget and the Budget Council from the provinces, who share the heavy load of tough decisions that must be taken in the sustainability of our finances. Thank you as well to what is called the Technical Committee on the Budget, which is composed of a few DGs who have done splendid work. To the Parliamentary Committee of Finance, Appropriation and Public Account, I express my sincere appreciation to all of you. And lastly, Umam Chawe and the family in general for understanding. And to the citizens of this beautiful country, for your faith in us, in our is our motivation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Order, honorable members. Order. Order. Honorable members. I thank the Honorable Minister. Order. Honorable Minister. You can take your seat so that I thank you properly.
Speaker.
I want to thank you for your presentation, Honorable Minister.
And
I will take note of you, Minister Mackenzie. And the papers tabled by the minister will be referred to the relevant committees. And we trust that this spirit shown today will proceed towards February for the tabling of the budget. Honorable Mackenzie.
Honorable Speaker, yeah, this is my fence.
Honorable
fence.
Mackenzie.
They must make an
Honorable Mackenzie, what's the point of order?
The finance minister has proven that we've turned the corner. He just made one mistake.
Honorable.
He didn't thank the government in waiting forever. For waiting forever.
Order, Honorable Minister, that's not the point of order.
But it is a clown minister.
Order, I request members to stand and wait for the presiding officer and the maids to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.